Hello and welcome to the second video on my series of renovating a house in Portugal. I decided to stay home the second day because of the news of COVID-19 and all that sort of stuff. I was wondering if there might have been a lockdown. So this is just basically me cleaning up reclaimed wood. I'm taking out nails and staples and stuff. So this wood actually came from a couch and a bed that had been left by the previous owners of the house that we're currently living in. So I took that stuff apart because the couch had basically, a dog had been sleeping on it and had been ripped and torn, so it was already ready to get dumped. So I basically took off all of the material and stuffing and foam and all that sort of stuff and kept the wood. Here what I'm doing is just cleaning up all of that stuff, taking out the staples and everything so that I could use it. The pieces of wood that you can see on the table is what I have put together that should make up the correct measurements for the bottom of the window frame that's in the house that's been rotted away. So you can see I'm just literally just going through each and every one. I don't have a hammer at home because everything is still at the other place. So haven't been carting the tools up and down. So I'm using, I don't even know what this tool is called. I've used it to cut tiles or chip away edges of tiles and to pull out nails and stuff. I'm using that both as a hammer and to pull out the staples. I ended up using a screwdriver to just get into the staples that have actually gone into the wood and get them lifted out enough so that I could use that tool to grip them and pull them out. I'm just using that to actually lever it out. There you go. I see, I'm just busy packing it out in the kind of configuration it would be in the actual house. Measuring, double checking. So some of the wood has still got glue on and bits of foam from when it was in the couch. So here I'm just setting it up in the vise, supporting it on the one end with blocks of wood. I'll actually move the camera now so that you can see. There you go. So I'm going to use a belt sander. I'm just busy adjusting it there. And that's just to get rid of all of the excess glue that was still stuck on the wood and the bits of foam and so on that had been stuck from me ripping it off. I'm just sanding the other side. This is just because I wanted to sand with a belt sander really more than anything. This is now the third day back at the house. I realized only after I'd gotten wood to the place that there was an extra little lip at the bottom. So I found a piece of whatever that board is called to put at the bottom. And then you can see I'm just busy measuring out, trying to use the rotten piece as a guide as to where the thing should be placed, using the ruler, marking it out there with a pen, and drawing a nice line. And then eventually I will just end up cutting that off to size and then using that as a reference for the rest of the wood. Because the wood that I did get from the reclaimed wood, pieces that go right at the bottom are a little bit oversized and I'll have to cut those down to size. So you can see I'm just using a long spirit level as a guide to try and cut a fairly straight line on this board. I can't even remember what it's called. So I'm just scoring each side of the board and then I can just break it off. I'm not too worried about having a super clean edge because that's all going to get hidden underneath the wood anyway. So as long as one side is nice and straight, that's okay. Again, just test fitting. This whole day was about test fitting, taking pieces of wood, marking them, cutting, test fitting, cutting a little bit more. And that's kind of the configuration it's going to be in, but one side will be trimmed off. Again, just going through this because I'm making this up as I go along. So there's a lot of standing around trying to figure out what's happening. Yeah, I tried to cut the piece of wood where the camera was just to actually be able to film it, but the second piece I went and cut where it was more comfortable and it wasn't moving around so much. Here I'm back with two pieces cut, marking the wood just to see where I need to actually go and cut it again. Same thing happening there. So I've cut little slits out, manage to mark on the piece of wood how I need to trim it down. So I do have a fence for this table saw, but it is quite a cheap table saw, so the fence moves around. So there's no way that I could guarantee that I would get a relatively straight cut. So instead I used the spirit level, clamped it down, and that way I could make sure that the blade was of an equal distance at both the front and the back. So unplugging, always make sure to unplug before I do anything with my fingers by the blades. And again, just taking the same stuff, bumping the camera there, but taking these pieces of wood, measuring them, trial fitting, trying to see where they should go. Making sure I don't cut in the wrong place. So again, I got this a little bit out, and then ended up using a piece of that board just as a spacer, which I'll glue in eventually at some point. Double checking measurements, a lot of going back and forth, making sure that I haven't messed something up. I want to catch any mistakes really early so that I don't go down the path. Because the only wood that I have to work with is what I have at the house at this point in time. So at this point in time, I think I've gone and cut everything to length. A lot of that stuff I did off camera. I just kind of got caught in the moment and cut the stuff up, or cut the stuff shorter on the table saw. And there I'm busy marking it out on the block that will eventually be the piece that the window slides into. Here again, test fitting. And I'm trying to get this to fit exactly as I'm trying to get this to fit perfectly within the existing window frame. A part of this will be cut out because it is still rotten. So I'm just trying to get it so that the bottom is as close to what it was before, so that when I do replace the portion on the side, it will be pretty much as it was before I started and before it was rotten. So lots of test fitting. Eventually I did end up cutting off one of the tabs, the tab on the right hand side, because there was no way I could get that to fit in there. But I'll make another plan to close that gap up between the wood. So obviously what's not on camera now is me shaving off little bits of the tabs and stuff with the chisel. Just trying to get it to fit. Like I say, eventually I got rid of the one tab because there was no way I was going to be able to get that in with the shape of the window frame. It kind of tapers, so I wouldn't be able to slide it in. At around about this point is, I think, the part where I figure out that that little tab has to go. There's just no way to make it work. Because I kept shaving it thinner and thinner, but eventually it'd be so thin that it was going to break off. It's pine, so it's not exactly the strongest of woods. Not quite. There's my son giving me a hand, giving advice. Here I've brought the window back, getting everything in place, just to mark off where the window would go. So once I have that in the right place and everything's done, I can go and mark that with a pen line. And then I know where I need to cut out a groove. So the window actually has a groove cut into it, so it'll, the piece of wood that I'm busy working with will actually need a lip, and then the window will slide down and the groove will go mate up with that lip, and that's what seals it off from water and so on coming in from outside. The end of the table saw. So what I'm doing here is just cutting that groove into the piece of wood. So I'm starting with one cut. I'll move the fence over a little bit, make a second cut. Then eventually I will use the table saw, just moving the piece of wood across the table saw to cut out the rest of it. I don't have any other kind of blade. So there again, just taking the ruler and making sure that it's exactly the same distance. So I apply pressure onto the wood to see where the teeth are actually cause an indent and make sure that I'm not, cutting the groove too wide, or that I'm not cutting the or that I'm not cutting it too deep into the wood. There's a lot of measuring and verification going on. Switch off, move the fans, make sure I'm going to cut the wood in the right place. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where I should cut it to make the most effective use of it, because I obviously don't want to be moving the fence 10 times to cut one groove into the wood. So as it is, I ended up with just the slightest little feather of wood left, and eventually I did end up pumping it over just to be able to get rid of that. And there you go, you can see I'm shifting the wood over so that the blade moves in between the two cuts that I've already made. It did work. I mean, it's probably not the best way to do things, but that worked for me. Again, trial fitting, window goes in, actually slides down, so there you can see it actually causes a nice seal over the piece of wood. And that's basically your weather protection and stopping, wind and so on coming in. So the top window's out, you can actually see me reaching over the top of that window and putting the extra bits of wood in. So the other bits of wood that I'm holding there will go glued on top of the pieces that are currently there. There you can see I'm busy disassembling it again. Like I said, lots of trial fitting, putting things in, trying to make sure I'm actually going to be able to get it to fit into the window before I start a glue up. And yeah, this bottle of glue, the bottom of the bottle that somehow managed to crack. And the more pressure I put on, the more air just comes out of the crack. So I ended up popping the top off and just pouring the wood out almost. So what you don't see here is I did a few trial runs of how I was going to put the wood together, um, just to make sure that I have the wood pieces in the right place, but I hadn't actually thought to do a trial run of where I was going to be placing the clamps. I only thought to do that afterwards, after I already put glue on, so there's a bit of angst and panic getting the stuff in the right places. So here I'm using the glue is going to be the main strength, and the screws are pretty much just to make sure that they stay in place, because I have multiple pieces that I'm gluing up in one go. I want to make sure that the wood pieces don't slide around as I glue other bits on as well. And the clamps I don't think would have been effective, and additionally I don't actually have enough clamps to be able to do that. So another piece going in, and then the final piece for this round of glue up going in. So there you can see there is a bit of a lip on one of the bottom sections, so I'll put a screw in that goes into this piece of wood that I've just glued on. So that'll hold that in place, and then I'll be able to use a clamp to clamp the two wider pieces together, and hopefully that will give me a nice solid piece. So these screws that I'm driving through are going into, or through the first wide piece at the bottom into the second narrow piece at the top. And then the clamps are holding the two wider pieces together. Then I use screws again, so that the last round of screws are going through the last of the wide pieces into the last of the narrow pieces. I don't know if that's making sense, but it made sense at the time. So adding all the clamps to make sure that this board gets glued properly. These are not the most high quality clamps, but they work sufficiently for this. I do really need to get better clamps. As you can see, this one pops off, and I have to put it back on again. So this is as far as I got before the government took steps to limit movement of people. so it's probably going to be a little while before I manage to put another video up. It's an unfortunate disruption, but COVID-19 has disrupted many people's lives, so I hope you and your family stay safe. Thanks for watching.